All right, let's go, everybody. Let's not waste any time. Let's get right into it. First skill up is Shield Assault. This skill requires a shield to use, and your character dashes forward, bashing a single enemy with its shield. This skill generates some threat, does some damage, and then applies the Shaken debuff, unless the target already has the Shaken debuff on it, and then it applies a stun. I like this. So far, so good. I would like to see it upgraded into something that possibly hits multiple targets with possibly more range, more like a circle or a half circle, or even an upgrade where it gets more range so that you can use it kind of more as an intervene if your companions are in danger. The second skill up is called Inciting Strikes. It is a damaging ability that slashes twice in a cone area that also generates threat on multiple enemies. It's a simple spell, so I got simple ideas. I would like to see it upgraded to add another slash with a wider cone that does extensive damage. Third skill up is Tremorine Bellow. It releases a thundering shout forward in a cone area, applying the stagger condition to your enemies. At the same time, your character will produce a stomp that does damage and also applies the snare effect to enemies around it. This skill has a synergy with Shield Assault. Used together, they do a stun, knocking the enemy to the ground. Next up is Grit. Grit is also a good spell, very interesting. I think it's a little costly. But before I can go further into explaining what Grit does, Grit is a spender. Its builder is a new resource called Courage. You stack Courage as a tank. By taking damage, it stacks up to 10 times. You activate Grit and you spend it. Grit applies a buff on their caster that reduces incoming damage by 15% base, but also reduces your movement speed by a whopping 30%. That doesn't matter as much because if you're using Grit, you're probably trying to take some damage more so than kite. What kind of irks me is that it also reduces your outgoing damage by a whopping 20%, which may or may not be a big deal depending on how long you have it activated in a tank's starting damage to begin with, but it seems a little excessive. But also Grit, as you're consuming stacks of Courage to reduce incoming damage, for every stack that you have that you lose, you get an additional 15% damage reduction. So that's a total of 30 for 10 hits, and you can't generate Courage while Grit is active. So it's a strong spell, and if you use it only when you have Grit, it's a 30% reduction in damage. That's significant. I just don't know if it should be 20% of your damage, and we really won't know until we understand how the damage works, I guess in Alpha 2 sometime. Next up is Aegis. Also a great idea for a spell. Needs significant work though. I'm probably one of the handful of people that think this, but it just seems real counterintuitive to me. Aegis instantly dispels all negative effects on the caster. That's great. This is where the problems start. Then it creates a protective dome behind the tank for 15 seconds. Transfers 50% of all damage received by the targets, so your team, within the area of the tank, to the tank instead. All targets within the cone also receive increased resistance to status effects for the 15 seconds. The group size is supposed to be 8. 50% of everyone's damage. That's a lot of damage. Also, it goes against principles of tanking because all tanks know you're supposed to grab and spin so that your DPS can hit the targets in the back without having to worry about taking any damage. You're asking them to step in front of the enemy where they're gonna take damage because they're gonna take cleave from the enemy and they wouldn't otherwise be there. This would only really have any real use in maybe some AoE, but it would be better off if Aegis was just a shield, and instead of putting a cone around you, it just puts shields on your whole group. You could even put it on a nice size cooldown because that is kind of powerful. Then just take this damage taken transfer mechanic and turn it into a whole nother skill altogether. Name it protection or guard, and allow the tank to use it to then put it on a specific teammate, likely one of your healers, maybe an off tank, and then you can share damage with them. That just makes more sense than having them reposition behind you to take damage that they wouldn't be taking if they weren't behind you in front of the boss in the first place. Again, a great idea, but I like my idea better, and then you just bump the cooldown up to like 20 or 30 seconds instead of the 10 that's on the tooltip. Correction, 20 that's on the tooltip. Crank it up to like 30. I don't know. Put down in the comments and let me know what you guys think. Then the last spell or skill is grapple. Grapple is replacing, or is the same skill as javelin from Alpha 1. You just take aim for a moment before hurling a hooked chain into a line, damaging the first target that it comes in contact with and immediately pulling them to you. It also causes a snare for 3 seconds, which is a slow. I mean, you know, it's a ranged pull. Every tank wants one. It's a good idea. As far as any ideas on how to improve it, it's called grapple. Have it upgrade to javelin. Make javelin be like a barbed spear, and then have it put like a really nice dot on the enemy as well, because that damage over time will also give the tank a nice little head start on the threat generation. Now, after going over all the spells, I'll just give a little spill on what I thought of the showcase and what I think of the tank overall. Everybody knows the drama that kind of pursued the first showing that they showed us was not acceptable. It just, that's the simplest way to say that. They immediately rectified the situation and they re-recorded, and the second recording is exceptional. It showed us everything that we need to know. We learned a lot about pacing and how the groups operate, the synergies. We got to see the tank really in action, see these skills really working. And that's all we can ask for. When they make mistakes, that they correct them, and they corrected it immediately. So that's all I really got to say about that. Now, the tank overall, I like it. We're in a good place for a level 15 tank that still has another 35 levels to go, a subclass to go, along with everything else in the game. The tank is in a really good starting place. It has came a long way since Alpha 1. I'm happy with it. I'm looking forward to it. It's still on my short list of classes I want to play, tied right now with Fighter. But, you know, I got some other videos coming along talking about some other things that happened in the showcase, because there was a lot of good things that happened with like the UI and the map and etc. So you guys just kind of stay tuned. Thank y'all for listening. Do the thing. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll holler at you guys later.